Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, let's all stand, and Commissioner Cessna will lead us in the pledge and invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day that you have given us. Let us serve one another with thanksgiving and joy during this holiday season, and remember the true reason for why we celebrate the season. Please provide us with wisdom and integrity, and guide us during our meeting to help lead our community in a positive direction. Keep all of our first responders and armed forces from harm, and grant that we may live in times of peace. Amen. Amen.
Are there any additions or corrections to the November 20th meeting, the City Commission? Not
Good.
stand approved as submitted. At this time, we have public comment. This is a time when, if you're not on the agenda and you'd like to speak to the City Commission, step forward to the mic and state your name and limit your speech to 5 minutes if you can. Is there anyone here? Okay. Moving on.
Mayor and Commissioners, item 6A, we'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the dedicated service of the following employees who have reached milestones in their service for the city. So Mayor, if you would join me, I'm going to read the names of those that we're recognizing today. And when I read your name, if you can join us up here for a photo opportunity, that would be great. The first person couldn't join us today. Scott Birdie celebrating 10 years with the Garden City Police Department. Jeremy Hatch, the electric department. Jeremy's celebrating 10 years of service. Thank you, Jeremy, for your service to the city and to the electric department. It's really appreciated. Thank you. Congratulations, Jeremy. Robert, am I doing it in the right order? Robert Herrera with the Solid Waste Department. Robert also celebrating 10 years of service. Robert, thank you for all you do. Appreciate you. Thank you, Robert. Sean McEntee with Garden City Fire Department. Sean McEntee is celebrating 10 years of service. Is he here? We'll make sure he gets that. Stephen Picard, Garden City Fire Department. Stephen also celebrating 10 years of service. Thank you, Stephen. Juan Cano. Juan is celebrating 20 years of service with Garden City. He's with the Parks Department. Thank you for putting the garden in Garden City. Thank you. Next, Greg Escobar, the Water Department. He's celebrating 20 years of service with the City of Garden City. Greg, thank you. Congratulations. Courtney Pruitt. Captain celebrating 20 years with the City of Garden City. Thank you. And Scott Potachik's also celebrating 20 years. He's not with us today with Garden City Police Department. Junior Salinas. And I thought your name was Junior this whole time. Junior, celebrating 20 years of service with the electric department. Congratulations, sir.
Thanks.
Congratulations. Mario Saucedo. Mario is also celebrating 20 years of service. The street department. Congratulations, Mario.
Good job.
And celebrating 30 years of service with the Garden City Fire Department, Rick Collins. Congratulations, Rick. Thank you for your service. Yes, if everybody that just received a years of service recognition could join Lauren across the hall for a picture, we would appreciate it. Anybody else that wants to snap a picture with their phone can go do that too.
They didn't want to be in the picture.
Nobody be in the background. Nobody wants to be happy in the background of a picture.
Few pictures as possible.
All of you are here for that.
Man, this seat's warm.
That's right. Shannon warmed it up for you.
I'll stay.
All right. Item 6B, Mayor and Commissioners, Marcy Smith, Director of Family Service for Catholic Charities of Southwest Kansas, requests that the governing body consider and allow the mayor to formally consent the willingness of the City of Garden City to be considered for refugee resettlement. There's a letter attached, but a little bit of background. The City of Garden City has been notified by Catholic Charities of Southwest Kansas that an impending executive order was issued by the President will require written consent from both the governor of the state and the local, a local official before refugee resettlement will be permitted in the city and the state. Now, just to be clear, this is for the purposes of either an affiliate organization or a partner organization being paid or reimbursed for the services they provided. In no way, shape, or form creates a rule about whether or not someone who is a refugee permitted into the United States is authorized to live in a city or not. And you're free to move about the country if you've sought asylum and this country has granted you that asylum. But there is assistance. This community has historically had agencies that have provided those assistance both in the form of a partner agency and an affiliated agency. So one of the provisions within the executive order is the ability for incoming refugees to resettle in areas where family and friends already reside. This provision is very important when it comes to new refugees assimilating to a new community and a new culture. Catholic Charities of Southwest Kansas has served the role of a cultural bridge dating back to 1979, and Catholic Charities of Southwest Kansas offers services that include cultural orientation, language and employment programs, and school enrollments. With a history of refugee resettlement, Garden City has realized the benefits that a refugee workforce can have on a community. Catholic Charities of Southwest Kansas would like to continue to serve in that same capacity as they have over the last several decades, but in order to do so, it appears that the city would need to issue a letter formally consenting to those services being reimbursed. So your alternatives are to allow the mayor to formally consent to Garden City's willingness to serve as a refugee resettlement community, or to not formally consent to that. It's a policy issue, so we have no recommendation, but certainly past practice would say that to be consistent with the services that have been provided in Garden City, not just by this agency, but other agencies, it would
Rescue.
be consistent to say
Rescue.
to approve it.
No, Marcy's here too.
Yeah, Marcy, if you'd like to speak, you may.
Thank you guys for squeezing me into the agenda because this all went very quickly and we didn't have a lot of time. We do have to have the letters by December 20th and they just didn't give us a lot of leadway on this. So another agency is meeting with the governor to get the governor to sign the consent as well. So we don't think we'll have any problem in Kansas with the governor signing. And we have had other municipalities have signed. So far things are going ahead as scheduled. But this will go into effect December 25th, so if we do not have a letter, then people will not be able to resettle in Garden City after December 25th. They can, however, like he said, they could resettle in another town and move to Garden City, but there wouldn't be any services available for them as far as the cultural orientation services and stuff that are now offered. So I appreciate you guys listening to us.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this request for the consent letter.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent letter. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, Marcy.
We'll have a signed letter for you ready to pick up later today or tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Item 7A, Assistant City Manager Cunningham will provide an update on the city flag issue.
Mayor and Commissioners, the last time I was before you on this particular issue, all of you voted and asked us to go and speak to the CIP group about the city flag issue. We did take this up with them, and although they are supportive of someone locally or a grassroots effort behind a city flag, they don't believe that city staff should spend time on putting any effort into, finding out what people want or soliciting different flags or even putting effort into voting on the ones that are currently out there. We are, as a staff, working on notifying all of those that participated through the makerspace on putting flags together to let them know that that was the outcome from CIP, and also that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't continue to work on that effort, that they can't continue to try and get people excited about one of those designs. It just won't be led by city staff or by this governing body.
Okay.
Any questions?
No? Anybody? No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Item 7B, Police Chief Mike Utes will present an update on the GCPD Organizational Study Action Plan.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. As promised, we're 6 months into this study, and we've completed almost 50% of the items. Matt, if we'll start with there you go. I'm not going to go through the items in yellow. The items in yellow are completed. If you have a question about it, I'll come back to it and answer those, any questions you have. This task here is regarding practice of using and allowing personal cell phones. The personal cell phones are used for department purposes, but the employees receive stipends. Certain employees receive stipends. And right now, it's under a legal review with a city councilor to identify what legal ramifications there are if we keep the personal phones or go to a city purchase cell phone. So we've researched it, and now it's waiting for some legal review. Task 1 under Communications Priority 3. Multiple employees should be trained and involved in social media posting to provide a backup for the PIO. We have this engaged in our 2020 training budget, and we have some folks that are already trained as a backup, but we want to get other line officers engaged in that. Communications priority 3, task 5, the use of force data should be included on the website for public viewing or included in the master activity report. We're in the process of formatting what it'll look like, and we're looking at adding it into a annual report on our website. McGrath Group praised this on our transparency, so we feel that this is one other area that we can include. We're almost done with the 2018 data, and then when we get it formatted, we'll format 2019 and push them both out on the website. The information is very gleaming about what we do in the PD. The percentage of use of force is very low. It's in the 4 or 5 percentile on the amount of times we use force in an arrest. So it's a great idea that they came up with, and we'll engage with that. Number 7, develop a multi-year strategic plan in collaboration with other city departments. Sophia Hernandez and Jared Smith out of the city manager's office and assistant city manager's office is facilitating this. They've already had one meeting with command staff, command group supervisors, commanders, and going over the mission statement, vision statement, core values. They've already done a survey, and then next step is to correlate that and look at putting together some teams and getting stakeholders and community members involved in creating our strategic plan. And we foresee that being a 5-year strategic plan. Equipment other priority 2, tasks 1 and 2. Those items have been put on the still called back burner, pending until we get done with our evidence audit and see how what our needs are going to be. Equipment other priority 3, initiate to conduct 1-year take-home vehicle study. That's been put on hold because of things outside of our control. Our vehicles that we purchased for 2019, we put out the bids and got the authorization to purchase them almost a year ago, and we've only received 1 vehicle. 5 are in transit, and 1 is being built. We're not the only agency dealing with this. It was something with Ford Motor Company in Michigan. A lot of these human resources, priority 1, develop a written policy to clarify work periods for the police department. A draft has been completed and is under review. We're getting ready to shift our, right now they work a 4 on, 4 off, 3 on, 3 off, the patrol officers and our dispatchers. That schedule is going to change per a recommendation from McGrath Group. That'll change at first of the year, so we're trying to define how that policy will look with that schedule. HR, priority 2. Number 1, we're still working with HR on the agency-wide disclaimer language. Number 3 has been implemented. Update the application authorization to include the verification process. We're using NeoGov and onboarding process and the hiring process. So that's in play now. So that'll be in yellow soon. Number 4, police department's still working with HR on creating that strategy.
Excuse me, Chief?
Yes.
So essentially, the sum total of a lot of these as they relate to human resources is going to be that a lot of the hiring, just all of the hiring, everything is going to be centralized under our HR department when these tasks are all completed. Is that correct? Am I assuming?
To some part, yes. Some of it, that's where we're trying to see what part of the process we currently have will remain with the Office of Professional Standards and what part will remain with the HR. There's a number, we do a lot of background investigations on them, and we're trying to identify what role goes to which department. But HR is notified of every step of the process as we move on.
Okay, thank you.
So we're trying to define what that'll look like.
So Chief, is that when you talk about the verification, is that the NeoGov that you're talking about?
Yes.
Is that, okay, so that's the background and that kind of verification?
That's part of the background.
Okay.
And the onboarding process. Am I correct with that? Right? Got my office professional standards in. I got backup here, so.
There you go.
Good question, thank you. I just skipped that one, didn't I, Matt? Okay. And this is the one, number 9. We've hired a third party, or the city hired a third party compensation consultant, McGrath, and they're in the process doing the compensation study. And number 10 and number 11, engage the stakeholders and modify the city pay plan. We're waiting to see how that comes out and the compensation study and identify where we're going to go from there. Number 12, implementing the biometric timekeeping system. At first, we thought there was a possibility of an app for the personnel to have on their phones to work. That's not available any longer, so we're back to the biometric timekeeping system, and we're going to be implementing that after the first of the year. We're looking at buying 3 or 4 machines as we speak. Develop a written policy to employees who do not report to work site. We're incorporating this into our work schedule policy. The CAD system will not allow us to, it doesn't speak with the biometric timekeeping system, so it'll be used for officers that respond a SWAT call out, for example. Don't respond to the law enforcement center, respond to the scene. They can go back and look at their times on CAD and do a manual punch into the timekeeping system. Number 14, discontinue the use of counseling as a form of discipline. That has been, we no longer do that. And the Department of Regulation is being revised to reflect that as part of another regulation. Number 15 is create a city-wide discipline policy that clearly defines the steps of progressive discipline. HR, Director Ali Medina is working on that. And number 16, we're waiting for number 15 to be done, but so that they don't, so they speak the same language. Human Resource Priority 3, Task 1, 2, and 3. These are all in process. Number 3 is pending the compensation study. HR number 3, priority 3, number 7, the new performance evaluation system. My understanding that's being piloted and will be implemented in the near future. Number 9, develop citywide management training. A schedule just came out for our supervisors to attend training next year from HR. So that was just posted, and we will be marking that off the list. Update city's employee handbook to indicate city's policy supersedes all department policies. And number 11, review department policies to ensure no conflict exists. We're working on making sure our regs don't duplicate. For example, what the city policy, a similar city policy. For example, the grievance policy in the city manual. We have a grievance policy in the regulation, our department regulation manual. And some of this was done years ago, decades ago, for several reasons, but we're going to look at removing the duplication out of the city, or out of the department regulation manual, and put in a clause in there, city policy, so we don't have one saying one thing, one saying the other. Number 12 is provide all policies to employees and require written acknowledgement. All our policies and regulations are online, but we are engaging in trying to get a contract from Eric Daigle Law Group on the East Coast, who's an expert in law enforcement, civil and criminal laws. And he develops policies and regulations. And with his program through Power DMS, when an officer reads it, it'll document that they read it and received it. So there will be some good documentation once we get that implemented. The next one is on the police chief and city administration should examine the peer support program to determine if there's a need for separation of programs from the unit that conducts internal investigations. We've reviewed that, and the current lieutenant that is engaged in that, we have several officers that are involved in the peer support. So what we're doing is revising our policy to indicate that that lieutenant won't engage in peer support counseling, but will be more of a supervisor to those that are involved in the peer support and will coordinate the efforts. Number 15, search for a third-party vendor for the EAP. Internal Standing Committee identified and made recommendations to the city manager, and that's in Matt's office, or HR, somewhere in between there. Leadership number 1, leadership priority 3, task 1. This will be done in 2020. Due date is 9 months, a year out, and we'll be working with Director Medina on conducting a self-assessment outcomes for our overall themes. Liability priority 2s, the revised policy addressing missing and endangered persons, that has been completed pending implementation and training to the officers. Number 2, provide direction for required medical attention for persons that were subjects of less lethal conducted energy weapons. We just need to add some additional language in that policy and combine that with task number 3, which so that all of our use of force policies are combined and to include the medical aspect of it. Number 4, develop and provide requirements and direction for crisis intervention techniques with persons exhibiting mental illness. This is under legal review with our city councilor. Once he's completed, then we will be meeting with our stakeholders from the hospital, Compass, and Genesis, as well as LiveWell, and identify what kind of team approach we can take on this. There's some different legal changes in the recommendations for law enforcement to how we respond to these situations. So we'll be reviewing that. The ones on evidence, I'm going to just skip through and, as we have a PowerPoint or a presentation on our evidence audit, and they all fall within that. I think, Matt, we're all the way done with liability number priority 3.
Oops.
It's just in the packet.
Okay.
I should just remove these yellow pages.
Page 31.
Staffing scheduling, priority 2. Review the digital forensic unit. There's 3 of them there. We're working with the sheriff's office, identifying how we proceed with this, whether we look at hiring collaborate and hire one civilian person versus going back and putting sworn personnel from both units in it. We both pay a maintenance cost every year, very expensive maintenance cost for the different equipment. So we're evaluating that. I think there's only one other. Technology, priority 3 is SunGuard RMS modules for RMS notifications. That'll be purchased in 2020 out of our 2020 budget. And the criminal trespass warning module should be obtained. We're not going to obtain that. We've got a scenario or a program, in-house program that we use that meets those requirements, and basically it gets put into RMS when someone's trespass warrant at not being at a certain location. Working with prosecutors, the next three all have to do with our report writing, some weaknesses we have in some of our personnel in documenting different incidents. We're implementing in training for our new officers in their training program, where they'll get some in-depth training on report writing. It's also budgeted for our 2020 training budget to work with that. Also, we meet weekly with our county attorney's office and receive feedback, and any issues that we identify, we provide back to the officers, supervisors, and they may approach it one-on-one with personnel or during a roll call training before shift starts. And we'll continue that once we have a new city prosecutor as well. Unit of function, priority 2. This is consider the value of any special policing programs at the elementary school level. We've been in talks with Livewell as well as the school district. There is a need. We remember the days of the DARE program. The school district has implemented the K through 6 for Too Good for Drugs and Too Good for Violence, and we're evaluating where does law enforcement fit into that piece, and there is several places that we do, and we're going to collaborate with the Sheriff's Office and the Highway Patrol and take a joint effort and work together with the school district to get this going. The last two items, the digital forensics and the strategic planning, I've already talked about. So before I get into the evidence, any questions?
I just wanted to make a point you reminded me of as we were talking about as we were reviewing the grievance policy and the city policy manual. I think we had spoke about it during a previous meeting about a specific whistleblower policy, and I just wanted to, again, kind of throw that out there to assure that we'll have a whistleblower policy included in our grievance procedures. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Good job.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, on the evidence audit update, this is just a overview of some timelines. The first page is on the A team, the evidence audit working group. It consists of Assistant City Manager Jennifer Cunningham, from the Police Department, Captain Ralston, Lieutenant Powers, Records Supervisor Casey Milligan, and both evidence technicians, Andrea Wesley and Lilia Aurora Sama. And then City Manager, intern Sofia Hernandez, as well as getting assistance and guidance and direction from Warehouse Manager Tyler Patterson from Public Utilities. Back on November 4th through the 6th, Casey Milligan, Andrea Wesley, and Tyler Patterson made a visit to the Evidence Division of the Hanover Park Police Department, where they evaluated their procedures, their regs, their packaging material, the evidence room, and came back with a whole lot of recommendations. So that's part of the process that they're going through. Reviewing policies and procedures, they're ready to roll out. They're about 50% done. I think they're now more than 50% done since this has been sent out, but projected due date is December 20th. They'll be presented to the evidence working group for review, then forwarded to the police department command staff for review, and then to myself for final review. Learn the current evidence program, determine if it will work or not. The current system, what they've identified, works. One of the top best programs out there, but there's additional training that's needed, so that's being looked into and worked at. There's also an upgraded software for the program that we're evaluating, as well as a money counter that actually counts any currency that's seized or found and turned in, and puts it into the system automatically with serial numbers and digitizes it. So great program. So we're looking at those.
Does that money go into the bank?
We are looking at how we're going to do that. For decades, it's been maintained in the evidence room. I can remember one time when we put money in the bank, that was when I was a young rookie detective, and that's when we seized like $200-some thousand. We put that right into the bank. But Jennifer is working on that process so we can get that done.
Chief, I'm going to ask you to stop and call a timeout for just a little bit. Mayor, we have a 1:30 public hearing. If we could jump to that item, and then we'll invite the chief back up to wrap up his presentation.
Okay.
And that's item 12A, a 1:30 public hearing on the matter of the governing body hearing questions, concerns, and comments from the public with regard to the 2019 budget amendments that are necessary to reflect actual 2019 expenses. Melinda?
You published the notice of budget hearing on November 21st, so you did meet the 10 days for today's date. We are amending 6 different funds for the city of Garden City. The first one is the HIDA grant. This is for salary and benefits adjustments for the patrol officer that's in that grant. The Recreation Commission, the tax receipts exceeded the budgeted amount, so we're providing them with the additional funds from the tax receipts. Special Rec and Parks, we participated in that great playground grant that we got over at Long Park, so we needed to increase the expenses there. The Community Development Fund, we had higher than anticipated ESG funds for this year, so we amended that fund. Project Development, there was reimbursement from the Star Bond project that we provided funds for in 2019. And then the Golf Course Building Fund, they utilized their cash carryover in that fund for their master plan. Is there any questions on these adjustments?
Entertain a motion to amend the budget as presented.
I move that we amend the budget, unless you're going to say something. Nope, okay. I move that we amend the budget as shown in the 2019 amended budget certificate.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we amend the budgets as shown in the 2019 amended budget certificate. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Melinda. Chief, you're welcome to come back up and finish your report.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, from page 6, Matt, obtain review property custodian and evidence technician job descriptions. On the job descriptions, this has been assigned to Tyler and Jennifer. It's in progress, and they're being reviewed as we speak. The next one is remove any found property that has been, that has passed 180 days. This was assigned to Tyler, Andrea, and Lily. It's completed. We'll do 12/20, but they're done. But they are looking at, as part of our evidence property policies, what found property are we taking? And why are we taking it? So there's got to be some value to it. So lessen our liability. Next one is review and decide on the best 3 new facility layouts options, find property, and obtain costs. That's that's being reviewed and under consideration by the working group. Review firearm disposal procedures and dispose accordingly. Jennifer has this one. Projected due date is December 20th. There's some statute issues, and I think she's working with our city councilors on that one. Destroy electronics and relocate supplies out of the evidence room. That has been completed. Tyler, Andrea, Lily, and Casey completed that. Guns, labeling, packaging, and organizing of locations and determined dispositions. We still have a lot of guns in the room. Tyler, Andrea, and Lily, and Casey are working diligently on that. Projected due date is December 31st. Money, removal of money, labeling, packaging, organization of locations, determine dispositions. Tyler, Andrea, Lily, and Casey are working on that. Due date of 1/15/20. The working group with Jennifer Sisson taking the lead on this basically is evaluating the use of financial institutions as a holding place for this. Drugs, labeling, packaging, and organization of locations and determine dispositions. Tyler, Andrea, Lily, and Casey are working on that. That is due 1/31/20. A lot of drug evidence that they have to go through. Main evidence room, labeling, packaging, and organization of locations and determine dispositions. That's in process by the assigned group, due February 28/20. The off-site evidence location, making necessary repairs to building for integrity of evidence, labeling, packaging, and organization of locations. Tyler, Andrea, Lily, and Casey are working on that, due March 10th. Now, keep in mind these dates. There's talking with the group. These dates are somewhat flexible because of the holidays, vacations already planned before these dates were made, and we have 2 individuals graduating from the CPM course too. So some other things that may fluctuate one way or another. So, any questions?
Do you think that some of these processes are going to, if I could be optimistic and say downsize, the evidence retention and the physical space needed for this, especially, dispose, or, coming to different dispositions about some of this evidence? Do you think that offsite evidence room is going to continue to be necessary in the future, or is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I think that this is going to clean up a lot of things. However, it's not going to downsize the amount of evidence. In fact, I think we currently are, the way we're processing is not a good planning for the future or what evidence we may take in over time, because we're going to continue to grow. And as we grow, whether it's a small case, just something they're taking a cell phone on, or whether it's a big case where you're taking a bunch of drugs, you have to have space for that stuff. Ideally, we would eliminate that offsite location because it's not a great place to store evidence, but for now, we're doing all of the things that we need to in order to make it work.
Okay.
So Chief, are you considering still partnering with the Finney County Sheriff's Department, or is that still the plan right now, to have one evidence room for both, or is it?
No.
So you're saying just one, so Garden City
No.
Police Department will have its own evidence room?
Right. The only thing that we're having conversations about is the collaboration. How can we collaborate and use our digital forensic examination, where they examine cell phones, dump the cell phones to get data off the phones or computers. That's what that collaboration. For the evidence, no, we're not.
So it will be solely a city department, is that
Yes.
correct?
Thank you. Good job. Keep
Thank
up the
you.
good work.
Thanks. Okay.
Mayor and Commissioners, items C, or 7C through D, I guess those 2 items, are staff reports. We're available for questions if you have any on either the airport report or the sales tax report. Item E is just a normal update pursuant to the franchise agreement with Cox. That leads us to item 8, meetings of note. Would like to also add that the special meeting for the purpose of reorganizing the commission will be Monday, January 13th. We do need to establish a time for that meeting. It could be in the morning. Monday mornings would move the cheese a little bit for staff that has some 2 different standing meetings, one at 9 and one at 10:45, but we could make that work if that's the best time for you, or 1 p.m.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
That would be our preference. Okay, that works
Do
for
we just
everybody?
need to-
Yeah.
Okay.
And that would have, those of you that remember back a couple reorganization meetings ago, before this happened in January, maybe 4 years ago, there's a section of the agenda of that meeting, that normally regularly scheduled meeting that would occur on, we do all that now in one meeting, and that's this reorganization meeting. So seat the new commissioners, do the selection of the newspaper, appoint the mayor, the vice mayor, and then do a reception, and that'll be the extent of the meeting. At this point in time, we wouldn't anticipate any other business. Also, it's been your practice on the 5th Tuesday to do a town hall meeting. In December, there's a 5th Tuesday, and it's on New Year's Eve. So
I would say no.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't think that'll
we can
work.
pass on that.
Yes.
We'll catch the next 5th Tuesday. All right. Doesn't necessarily flow with our spirit of experimentation, but that's okay. Discretion is the better part of valor. I don't know that any of those require RSVPs that aren't already in.
What are we driving for the parade?
What do you want to drive? We got,
The city has 2 floats, if you would like to.
I think you get to ride on those. They're
Do we
a
have
utility.
anything
Yeah, do you
enclosed?
wanna- yeah.
Anything
Yeah, maybe you could drive the
enclosed?
big electric, yeah, that would be nice, elected apartments.
Electric department?
We have the Kia. We can arrange for another vehicle. I didn't
I
know if
could
you.
drive
I
it.
think last year they rode with the electric department, those that.
Well, we just had a pickup 1 year. Pickup? Yeah, pickup be good.
Okay.
All right, I think we're ready for 9A. It's the appropriation ordinance. If approved, it would be ordinance number 2496-2019A.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve appropriation ordinance number 2496-2019A.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the appropriation ordinance 2496-2019A. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Item 10A, the governing body is asked to consider and approve a motor vehicle nuisance resolution. It would remove a motor vehicle nuisance identified at 2315 Tonio Avenue. And if approved, it would be resolution number 2835-2019. Carol?
Yes, we do have a vehicle nuisance. This is an inoperable or unregistered vehicle located at 2315 Tonio Drive, or Avenue, excuse me. It's gray two-door sedan. Our code compliance person has gone through the steps to notify this resident. We have not received any communication, and so we're going to the next step of this resolution for removal of the vehicle. Any questions?
Okay. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2835-2019.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve resolution 2835-2019. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now ready for item 12B, and Assistant City Manager Cunningham, along with Confluence Water Technologies, Ballard King, and Barker Rinker Seacat Architecture, will present the concepts for the new Garden City Aquatics facility. I know Jennifer's trying to reach those consulting firms on the phone, so bear with us just a second.
Doug and Darren, are you guys both there? Hello? Okay, great. I'm gonna put you on speakerphone and hook you up to the mic. Yep.
All right, so I think we'll have a welcome, by the way. We'll have the representatives from those firms I mentioned introduce themselves over the phone so we know who's all taking part in this public meeting. So those of you with Confluence Water Technologies, Ballard King, and Barker Rinker Seacat, if you guys will introduce yourself.
Terry
everybody.
Berkman
This
with
is
Confluence.
Doug Whitaker with Water Technology. I look forward to listening to what everybody has to input today.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
This is Darren Barr with Ballard King and Associates. Jeff had a commitment that prevented him from participating in the call today, but he had gone ahead and he and I had worked through the numbers, so hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions and address any concerns you might have.
That's it on the phone, and then I'm Terry Burke-Bigler with Confluence.
Thanks, Terry. Do you want me to start with what's in the packet and then we go to this, or start with this?
Start with the memo.
Okay.
I was just going to kind of give that heads up. So, Mayor and Commissioners, how we're going to play this is I'm going to go through the memo and hit all of the boring meat and potatoes of kind of what we're doing. And then I'm going to hit on the concepts just briefly, and then Terry will jump up and he'll go through each concept with you, explain how they came up with it, what the design looks like, why it looks like that, and all of the other pieces that go along with it. So. And then at the end, there will be time if you guys have questions for either those on the phone or for Terry or for myself. So, back in July, this governing body asked that we begin working with Confluence to come up with a design for the new Garden City Aquatics facility. We have worked really hard over the last 6 months to put before you what is before you today. It took a lot of phone calls, it took a lot of work and a lot of sweat and tears to get here and to get something that we felt like was a viable option for our new aquatics facility, and we feel like we've done that. So we're excited to show them to you today. What I want to note for those that are listening or watching, the information that's being presented to you all can be found at the same location on our website as all of the other information from this entire process. It's all from the very beginning until now, and all of this will be included. In addition to that, we will be putting this information out on our social media at the end of this meeting today. And we're going to have a little contest to have people like and comment and share to try and get their engagement on this and provide some feedback for you guys going into your next meeting, in addition to what we're going to be doing with the CIP group on December 12th. So we'll be doing a lot of things to get as much information and kind of see how the community feels about all of this to prepare you to make your decision on December 17th. But the idea behind this packet today is that it's informational only, and then at the end of this, although there are several alternatives, those same alternatives are going to show up on the December 17th meeting. At the December 17th meeting, staff is going to ask you to pick one of those alternatives or some variation that you all can come up with of those alternatives. But today we're not asking you to do that, we just wanted you to be able to see those. Okay, so jumping into what's being provided. There are 6 concepts, and what you're going to see and what Terry from Confluence is going to talk to you about is each one of those and kind of how they came together, but I'm going to briefly hit them. The first one is what we are calling the renovation concept. This is a renovation of the bathhouse. All of the concepts, except for the last one, include a renovation of the current existing bathhouse and then an added facility for concessions. A small building for concessions, essentially. On the renovation concept, what happens is there's a PVC membrane that will go inside the facility. There will be some new mechanics, some new piping, and it will do its best to essentially renovate the facility. That comes at just under $16 million. And there would be a maintenance cost of about $2 million every 10 to 15 years. Some of the things that I asked that I'm not entirely sure that we have an answer to yet is how that might hold up over the course of our winters. Being that our large facility is not covered and it's not something that we could protect from the elements, how long might that last, or what might we run into over a cold, dry winter? But those are all things that we would have to, if we chose that option, those are all things that we would have to consider if we dived into that. And we would have to be putting back enough money to put a new PVC liner in there every 10 to 15 years at a $2 million cost. Or if something happens sooner, we would have to be able to do that as well in order to keep that up. The other things that it wouldn't fix, some of the settling issues and other things that are kind of outside the control, except for to remove the concrete and start over. Obviously, a PVC membrane is not going to fix those items, but it would resolve some of our water loss that we think is attributed to seepage through the concrete. So that's option 1. Option 2 is a full replacement. A lot of people through this process have said, well, if you're going to take it out, go back with exactly what's there. And so we really challenged this group to do that, to take the footprint of the current big pool and redo it exactly as is, not adding any additional features, just putting it back as is, and you can see in what is presented to you, that's just under $23 million. And we would have to consider that as part of this, a lot of our operation expense would not go down. The only one that would really, we would see a reduction in would be chemical, because we wouldn't have that large water loss. We would still have to maintain that large of a facility, and we would still have to staff that large of a facility. So those are things that we need to be considering as we decide which one of these is the best option for us. So then we jump into the new concepts. The first one is Concept A. Concept A is what we have all been calling the base model. It reuses the baby pool, it reuses the splash park, it creates a 25, it creates a small competition pool, and just basically like your very basic no frills. Like there's nothing to it, there's nothing, no recreation to it other than what is currently there, because we would consider the zero depth baby pool that's there and the splash pad area to be recreation use. So that facility comes in at $7.5 million. And then we jump a little bit into B1 and B2. And I want to talk about these together because there's kind of a split when you get to these two models. B1 focuses more on a competition facility. So it moves the 25-yard by 25-yard competition pool to a 25-yard by 50-meter, which is what we have now. We have a 50-meter. And then B2 focuses more on a recreation. So it keeps the 25-yard by 25-yard, but it adds some additional features for recreation, such as a new zero-depth entry and a recreation area and the lazy river that you see in the photo. So B1 comes at a cost of just over $10 million, $10.2, and B2 comes at $10.5. So pretty comparable, but essentially if you choose one of these, you're choosing kind of one path or the other. You're choosing a recreation path or you're choosing a competition path. Not that we can't still compete in a 25-yard by 25-yard, but what we have heard from those who do competitive swimming and have turned out to have those discussions is that they would like a 50-meter pool for a competition facility. Then we jump into C, and C is essentially B2 and B1 merged together. So you're essentially saying we can't decide which one is more important to the community. We think both are really important to the community, so we'd like to try and get both of them. And that comes at a cost of almost $12 million, just shy of $12 million. And the last concept is Concept C, except for removing the bathhouse and putting in a new entrance facility entirely. And you can see that the cost jumps to almost $12.9 million. So that's Concept D. Those are the 6 concepts that are out there. In addition to these 6 concepts, I asked the consultants to give you a menu of things that if you picked one of these concepts and you said, but I'd really like to see something else, because one of the things that you all talked a lot about in your October 1st pre-meeting is that you wanted there to be something that set us apart from other people, whether that be for our own citizens or whether that be for people who come to visit us. You all felt that the big pool did that. It offered something that people couldn't get anywhere else and something that our community was really proud of, and you wanted this new facility to do the same thing. And so the Confluence group went out and looked for items that would try and fit that. And so they put on here a climbing wall, which would be a $50,000 expense, a ninja course, which is a $300,000 expense, a bull slide with run out, which is a $550,000 expense, a fly high slide, which is $535,000, a surf simulator at $2 million. So you could take any one of the concepts and add any of these things, or add a combination of these things. We are going to show you, when Terry gets to the slides, we're going to show you a video of a couple of these. The ninja course and the fly high slide are both things that are pretty new to the market and haven't been done here. And so it is something that could potentially set Garden City apart if you were looking at aquatic facilities and what they have to offer. So we're going to show you some videos of those so you can get an idea of what they look like. So then, once the concepts were designed, then Ballard King had the job of going through and setting up staffing requirements, hours to be worked, how much we might charge for admission costs, how much the facility would cost to operate, each facility would cost to operate, and then where that expense and revenue would fit together and create a difference in how much we would have to cover. Because obviously at the end of the day, the thing we're trying to calculate from a staff and commission perspective is how much do we have to cover in expense, and then how much do we have to cover in debt service, because we need to be able to do both of those things. So the chart that you see included in here goes from the renovation concept all the way through concept D, and it lines out the expense. And this is a short version of what is included in your packet and what will be found online. People can find in-depth detail for each piece of this in the Excel spreadsheets. We pulled out this small chart so that you could get a glimpse for what each of the concepts will provide. So you can see on renovation or replacement, because what we took into consideration is that we were going to be able to save a little bit of money on chemicals, but we're not going to create a whole lot of new revenue on those facilities because we don't have anything to base that new revenue off of other than maybe warmer water temperatures and maybe a perception, we would hope, that it was more clean than people had perceived it before. But those were the only things we could really attach to those two as maybe spikes in revenue because we weren't adding any other features. And then concept A, B1, B2, C, and D were put together by Ballard King as part of this whole assessment and as part of the concept assessment. And so you can see that right around, other than for the renovation or replacement, we need about $322,000 a year to cover just the expense portion, and that does not include the debt service portion. And then on the other concepts, we need between $95,000 and $123,000 to cover the expense portion, and then we would have the debt service in addition to that. The next piece that I wanted the commission to be able to see, because it's not actually something that's tracked as part of the day-to-day or operational expense of the facility, but it's something we have talked a lot about over and over, is the water consumption. And so if you look at this, the current facility, and that dollar sign is a mistake, but the current facility is using 32.5 million gallons of water each summer. So you can see any of the other concepts, any of the other 6 use significantly less water. Now, granted, the renovation and the replacement still use just over 3 million, which is almost double what any of the other facilities are using, but it's significantly less, even for those 2 models, in the amount of water that would be used each season. And these water amounts include filling it at the beginning of the season, so filling it all the way up, and then all of the evaporation and splashing and water loss that you would have throughout the course of the season. So then we jump into, I kind of did a little bit of analysis for you of what we're spending on the current facility. It's hard to give you exact numbers because, as you all are aware, as you review our budgets, what we set for a budget, which tends to be right around that $500,000 range for the big pool, has never been $500,000. It's always doubled, or the amount that we put in for a capital expense has gone up. And the only reason in 2019 that we kept it lower is because you guys were making these big decisions about what was going to happen with the pool, and so we held off on some of the things that were really important, like the chemical building, and some of the things that we didn't think we should invest the city's money into if it was just going to come out after one more season. So the number that I ended up using, and you can kind of go through my calculation to see how I got there, but I used a number of $750,000 annually as the number that you all would use to essentially pay expenses and pay your debt service. And so that's what I used to calculate through the examples that I give you in here. And then Melinda was so kind to go through and provide at different levels of spending, so from $6 million to $14 million, how much your debt service would cost. And obviously there's going to be some variations in there because some of the projects fell at 7.5 or 10.5 or whatever it may be, and we can narrow those down. But I tried to pair them up with the projects so you'd have a pretty good idea of where each of the concepts might fall. The only one that you don't see on here is the replacement because it was at 22, and Melinda was already gone before I could have her calculate any farther than the 14 million. So, but you can obviously see from the chart that we would need significantly more than what's listed there for a replacement at the $22 million. So what I did is I went through and used concept A as an example, and I assumed that you wanted to add, since we were talking about a base model, you wanted to add the Ninja course and Fly High slides to this, which put you at a total of $835,000 in additional expense to the base model cost. So just over $8 million for the entire facility, putting you right around that $575,000 a year in debt service. And so you can see as you go through this, I went through and detailed out for you how much of that would go to expense, how much would go to debt service, and how much you would have left to do something else, either to work your way towards B1 or B2, or to reduce your admission fees, or to do something else. And I also put in here kind of a little explanation to you that Ballard King, when they did this, assumed that you all would be charging $5 admission to get into the big pool. And as soon as I saw that, the first thought I had in my mind is that's probably not where the 5 of you are at. Maybe you are, and maybe you've come to that point since then, and after looking at that, you're all fine to move forward. But I also took into consideration the idea of staggering those to be 4s and 3s, to be all 3s, to have across the board $3 to get in, across the board to $4 to get in. And you can see at a staggered 4 and 3, so 4 for adult and seniors and 3 for kids, you'd have to find another $8,600 annually to make up for that. At all being $4, you'd have to come up with $20,000, and at all being 3, you'd have to come up with $3. So these things can all be modified and changed for what you want. It's just that at the end of the day, though, that money has to be made up somewhere, and it either has to come out of money that we're currently spending and the project concept, the expense, the debt service, and the admission cost, or it has to come from you all deciding that you're going to spend above and beyond what we've currently been spending. So leading up to December 17th, what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to select one of these concepts. We're going to ask you to select them as is or to make modifications to them, either add additional things or take things out. We're going to ask you to give us a target admission price so that we can figure out what we need to spend, and a target cost for us to spend annually, which would be on debt service and expense. So basically a total project cost. Yes. Yeah.
Can I bring up a point that
Yes.
seems, I certainly want this project to move along very
Sure.
quickly. And I appreciate all of the work that's gone into getting this on as a business item for today and for the 17th. But as you point out, all of these policy decisions that need to be made that will then affect the operations and the decisions over the next 2 years, it seems to me that we're going to be seating a new commission that is going to be carrying out and having to deliver on those decisions that are made. Would it be more appropriate to have the new commission vote on this concept, taking that into account, knowing that I so much want to be part of this decision, but at the same time may not reflect, what, as I'm an outgoing commissioner, what the new commission wants to proceed with. And I just want to put that out there, unless there's some deadline looming that this decision has to be made at the next meeting.
No, so staff's only thought process on this was, and we obviously, Confluence, Ballard King, Water Technology, myself, we've discussed this a lot because we weren't sure we were going to be able to make these deadlines over the last couple weeks. And honestly, what we came up with is we felt like this commission charged us with this task 14 months ago, and you all have really been part of this process along the way. And no matter what happens, every time we change from one commission to the next, there's always policy decisions that one is making that's leading to the next. That doesn't mean that the next commission can't make adjustments or changes to that, or couldn't vote to, as they get farther into the project, to change something entirely. But I think, at least from staff's perspective, as we prepared for that, we felt like the 5 of you have been so invested in seeing this project through that it was something we wanted to make sure that we at least put before you, whether or not you all choose to make that decision by these deadlines. But we kind of put that deadline on ourselves to at least have it before you to consider. And then from there, it's up to all of you whether or not that happens.
I'm not sure that I'd feel comfortable voting on this today.
No,
We're not
voting on
asking
it
you to
today.
vote on it today, Mayor.
17th,
Yeah.
Yeah, so
There's-
just to go a little bit farther. So Mayor, what we're actually asking you to do is to take this information. We're asking that we put this out to the community, and over the next 2 weeks, what we would like to do is two things. One, we want to go to the CIP group and charge them with exactly what we're asking you. Questions about admission, questions about concept, questions about added features. We want to ask the CIP group who has invested time. Most of those individuals come back every year to the CIP group over and over and over and invested in a project, whether it be at the cemetery or whether it be downtown. And so I feel like this is really a opportunity to give something to them for all of their hard work for you guys, and really point them down answering every single one of the questions you guys would have to answer. The other piece of this is staff, Sophia and Jamie came up with a great idea to basically ask two simple questions to the community. And then by them like, comment, share that post, they get entered into a contest where we're going to give away prizes that start out at movie tickets and then work their way into 50 passes for this coming season, for the last season at the big pool, and then finally a family pass to whatever we decide, whatever gets decided. Family season passes for the new facility, in hopes that the community will get really excited about what's out there and take a look at it and engage themselves. And the two questions we would ask the community is, one, to basically do their top three, their first favorite, their second favorite, and their third favorite out of the concepts. And then on question 2, to do their first favorite, their second favorite, and their third favorite, if we were to add any of those additional features, what those would be. They're gonna have all of the information before them, and then we would add to your packet for December 17th, in addition to all of this information, we would add that community information, any comments or feedbacks that we receive to the pool design email address that we have set up on our website, and then the information from the CIP group voting polls that we do through CIP.
What about, I'm wondering on this length of the competitive pool, is it, what do we need? I mean, what are most competitions? Are they 50 meters?
We can let Darren from one of the groups say if you want. What I will tell you is we've done a little bit of checking into this, and I think locally that's a question that you all need to be asking your constituents, because I don't know that this is necessarily coming down to a question of whether or not we can do something, but it's a desire of those who do competitive swimming. And there is a reason for that. But because I don't competitive swim, I don't want to be the one that screws up what that answer is for you. But there is a group out there who can very much explain to you what the reason is for a 50 meter or the desire for a 50 meter competition facility.
I
And
mean, I don't understand why you can't go down 25 meters and go back 25 meters at 50.
so Darren,
So
if
what
you
is it?
Darren, if you can hear me, do you want to weigh in on the 50 meter versus 25 yard by 25 yard?
Sure. So it's a great question. It's one that comes up pretty often. And Doug Whitaker, if I stumble here, please feel free to jump in. So within USA Swimming and within competitive swimming, during the months of September through March and April, the focus of competitive swimming in the United States is 25 yards. From April through late July, early August, they swim what they call a long course, which is 50 meters. Most swim clubs will look to try and build a 50-meter pool because it maximizes the number of lanes that are available. It maximizes the number of swimmers that they can practice at one time. If you get creative, you could do long course meets, you could do short course meets. It gives you a great deal of flexibility. However, it's a 50-meter pool. So the general public, while I'm a former competitive swimmer, Doug's a former competitive swimmer, we get really excited about a 50-meter pool because those are cool and we like those. The general public is not interested in that body of water. So again, kind of when push comes to shove, if you have a 25-yard pool, you're still able to go ahead and accommodate practice needs of competitive swimming. They just would go ahead and then compete long course in a 50 meter body of water. So it kind of depends on where you want to invest, and it depends upon the level to which you want to support that program.
Darren, this is Doug and council members. I think Darren had a very eloquent answer. I think the other component to that is when you look at that large of a pool, that's one of the things that Jennifer had gone over in her presentation about some of these options, like a Ninja Cross and a High Fly slide. And the reason for those is to increase the user ability and attraction value of that large volume of water for recreational components to help drive revenue. And again, help support and to help support that very important body of water for the competitive swimming, but also understanding that the kind of silent majority of users are the recreational users that want to have fun things to do at the pool, and we want to all make sure it's a healthy activity and a great user experience.
So are you saying so you're saying if we added on the Ninja that you'd need a 50-meter pool, or you could still do that in the 25-meter pool?
Could you repeat that question?
Well, you talked about some of the add-ons. So are you saying with the Ninja course, would we need the 50-meter pool, or would we be able to do it in the 25-meter pool?
The answer is you could add the Ninja course onto either of those pools. When we look at the High Fly slides, you would need the 50-meter pool to accomplish that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So from there, that's kind of the more meat and potatoes of what is included in the memo that I'm sure all of you can read and all of the attachments that are there. But I want Terry to jump up and run through all of the hard work and kind of ideas that went into each one of these concepts. So I'll let him take over. He will in 90 seconds.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks, Jennifer, for setting things up. And I'll do my best to kind of point questions to Doug and Darren as need be. But I wanted to start out, before I go into all the concepts, really kind of retouching on what were some of the things we heard from the community. Because all the concepts, aside from the renovation and replacement concepts, all the new concepts are really driven by trying to incorporate the top elements that the community told us they wanted to see in this new facility. Shade was one of those big ones. So even though you may not see that all over these concepts, shade is incorporated into the pricing structure. Additionally, new concession facilities. In the recreational realm, zero depth entry, which is essentially like your baby pool today, the lazy river, the inflatable play, which you have one today that we think can be reutilized, and a wave pool, which can actually be incorporated into a lazy river. So we can accommodate that, although it might not be the big lazy river like you might see at a large aquatic park. Drop slides, tube slides, multiple slides, and then some of the adventure elements like zip lines. Well, maybe not zip line, but the Ninja course we think is a more unique thing. And then the play features that some of them are simply replacing what you already have in your baby pool or the spray ground or updating those. And then from an architectural standpoint, we're not getting into that yet. I would say think of this as if you're designing a home or a building. Right now we're laying out the rooms, how big are the rooms, where do the rooms go. Next spring, depending upon the decision you all make, then we start selecting colors and finishes and all of that. So in terms of a deadline from our standpoint, if we really are trying to meet a start of construction at the end of this next season, we start backing up against a pretty tight window. So while you may not have to make a decision in December from our standpoint, the sooner we can get started on that design phase, the better, because even after you make that decision, there's a time period simply to get new contracts in place and get started on the design. And then on the back end, we've got to work out contracts with contractors, bidding. So our design window and the opportunity to engage the community in the storytelling that we've talked about. And again, the finishes and really what make this place unique and have that character that you're after. That's important time, and we don't want to short circuit that. So in a lot of ways, we are sort of up against a design deadline, if you will. So sooner is better. I would just offer that. So I'm going to go. I mean, the renovation and replacement concepts, I think Jennifer covered those pretty well. What I did do is I've listed out some pros and cons, and we can provide those to you. They're our own, if those would be helpful for you. And I did this for all the concepts. Renovation concept, pros. So essentially, pros, it retains that big pool configuration that people are really proud of. And I think that is, from a community standpoint, that's a positive. It retains a 50-meter competitive pool. The renovation, it mitigates the water loss issue that you've got now. Hopefully also improving water quality through improved mechanical systems, filtration, circulation, as well as temperature control, as Jennifer alluded to. It retains and renovates the existing bathhouse, which really all the concepts do, which we're pretty pleased with. We weren't sure coming into this if it was even viable, but as BRS has gotten into it, we think there is a viable way to do that. And then we're adding a concessions building, so something where you can actually store food products on site safely and have a better experience for where people can enjoy their concessions. And then I use the term enhanced entry sequence, and essentially what that means is we're trying to reconfigure the drop-off area so it's really more intuitive and easier for people to get in and out. Trying to spend the money inside the fence, so we're not being too lavish with this space. We think when you go through these concepts, I'll talk about site costs. Really on all this for the site costs, we're trying to be minimal. Resurface the parking lot, expand it where we need to maybe grab a few more parking spaces and improve circulation. And other than that, just reconfigure the entry sequence. So when you come in, you know where you're dropped off. It's safe for kids to be dropped off. Maybe people don't drop off at the street and have them run up the yard as often, things like that. Some of the cons with the renovation approach, there's really no new entertainment features. You're going to have slides, you're going to have a big body of water, and the spray ground and kids pool that you have today. With that renovation concept, still have some concerns about settlement. That could just continue to create maintenance issues. It's not permanent. As Jennifer mentioned, the liner needs periodic replacement and upkeep. And it is still going to be inefficient to staff and guard just because of its size and configuration. And then you've got the high operation expense versus that limited attraction. So lower fees, less revenue potential. I'm not going into kind of the cost comparisons. I'm just trying to give you pros and cons. Replacement concept, very similar, retains big pool, retains 50-meter, mitigates water loss, retains, renovates existing bathhouse, and enhanced entry sequence. What it really does is it helps to kind of avoid or mitigate that settling issue. If we can go back in and amend the subgrade as we're rebuilding that. But it really doesn't add any additional entertainment value. So similar to the renovation concept.
Terry, where's your entrance on this existing and
It would-
several of these? Are they in
Yeah.
between the two buildings?
Yeah, so essentially your entry would be in between the two buildings. So the idea that right now, instead of having a little wooden shed, you would actually have a full-time concession building and an admin building over there, so some office space. And then you would be able to have a ticket window where people, and you gate that off, much like it used to be when you would come in through the gate and go through the bathhouses.
Right.
So now moving into the new concepts. Concept A, and I'm going to try to share some kind of how we approach these designs that will be consistent throughout to just save time. All of these concepts that maintain the existing bathhouse, except I believe one, are showing a new concession building on the west side of that, as you just asked, Mayor, with a new entry portal and a kind of enhanced drop-off, and site work is similar. You'll see on there we've talked about future parking expansion, potentially future parking on the street. That was discussed by some of the community members about, can we improve the parking at the ball fields? Well, yeah, but maybe just not a part of this project. So we wanted to at least kind of capture that. So this concept, the base, Concept A, it incorporates a 25 by 25 yard pool. it keeps the existing, it updates the existing zero depth entry or kiddie pool, and it updates some of the mechanical systems of the spray ground. And then it reconfigures and builds new slides that empty into runouts, as opposed to dumping into a plunge pool or the pool as they do today. One thing I would say when we approach kind of laying out these amenities, if you were to look at a kind of ground up with no limitations, we generally want to put the shallow water, zero depth entry closer to the entrance and put the deeper water away, because you've got kids that run through and you've got parents that are trying to keep track of them, or daycare people that are trying to keep track of a bunch of kids. And so it just gives a little bit of a buffer. So when they are taking off, they're not met with a 3-foot body of water. In this case, because of the location of that zero entry pool and trying to be efficient in how we're laying things out, that competitive pool gets a little closer than we might want normally to the entrance. But it doesn't really make sense. The slides are an area of a lot of congestion, a lot of moving parts, and we don't want that. We wouldn't flip those. So if you look at that, that's why the elements are where they are, and trying to work with the existing features. And in all these concepts, we're proposing a new mechanical building, so something to enclose all the equipment that's down there, and new equipment. You can see some of the features. These will be similar throughout, so you can see what a 25 by 25 pool looks like versus something that would be twice that long. And then new slides. And cost rundown, so you can see site work is essentially the same for all these concepts. Site work we're calling is basically everything outside the fence, okay? So some grading, parking upgrades, some site lighting around the parking lot, things like that, new sidewalks in and out. A big driver that's pushing that cost up in the site cost is demolition of the existing facility. Because there's a lot of concrete. And we haven't gotten numbers from contractors yet, but our best kind of educated estimate on this is you could be spending, roughly $500,000, $300,000+ to tear that existing chunk of concrete out, haul it off, or, grind it up, use it as sub-base. So we'll get better numbers on that once we get a little further into this, but that right there is a big unknown, and so we're trying to be cautious and not come in with something that isn't realistic.
So that's in the architectural?
That is in the site work number, that 1.014 million.
Right.
So
I
we've
thought you
got
said
that.
that was outside the fence.
Well, aside from that, any of the new stuff would be outside the fence. Yeah, but yeah, all the
Demolition is in the.
demolition of all the concrete. If you were to take out everything but the existing spray ground and the kiddie pool, that's about what we're estimating that to be. And additionally, in there is some infrastructure cost. If we need to upsize or upgrade any utilities serving the mechanical building, some of that. So we're making sure we're accounting for some of that in that site cost. Aquatics, as I said, is everything, including the fence, everything in. And then architectural would be renovation of the bathhouse and then the new buildings. So you kind of know where those numbers are broken out. Design fees, generally at this point, we're just kind of saying roughly 10%. We'll get more detailed on that once we start working through actual design scope. Contingency. So normally at this early stage on a site project, we might have a little higher contingency and be in the 20 to 25% range because we have a lot of unknowns yet. However, the aquatics, those parts and pieces are a little more known, a little more standardized, if you will. So that contingency is lower. That's why we put in parentheses there at 10% for aquatics, 25% for the architectural and site work. Kind of blend those together, I think we're at 12.5%, 13% for contingency across the project. What is that? That is just, it's a bucket that helps us account for any unknowns that might come up during the course of construction. As we get further detailed on the design, that contingency number can start to come down. So, you know, that at this early stage, we want to be mindful that we aren't too low on that number because there's still a lot to be learned. We haven't done geotechnical work. We don't know what might be causing some of that settlement. It could just be the seepage of the water. We don't know. Soft costs, so permitting, contractor overhead and profit, things like that. Pretty standard numbers, but just some of those additional things that add to the bottom line. I won't go through that on every one, but just so you have an idea of what's in those. And then we've just put an allowance of about $50,000 in there for owner-provided things like deck chairs, furnishings, umbrellas, additional equipment you might need for startup. Concept B1, as Jennifer mentioned, this is an approach that says, hey, maybe the 50-meter competitive pool is important. How do we do that and still provide some recreational value? Replace the slides with some new slides, reconfigure them, but still try to work with our existing kiddie pool and spray ground to try to be smart with the dollars we're spending. We've incorporated some spectator seating for the competitive pool that would be permanent and in place. And then with that, it comes the diving boards as you would have in the 25 by 25 and so forth. I will say in this concept or in any of these, if you were to say, hey, we want to add a ninja course, we want to add the fly high slide, it would reconfigure this layout a little bit. We'd have to move slides around and things like that, but it certainly can be incorporated. Come on. Who's got the button?
Terry, this is Doug. One of the things that I think is important to note at this time, with this 50-meter pool, it's a much more usable 50-meter pool than the existing configuration, due to the fact that as officials can, now walk up and down both sides to monitor the strokes and do all the things that they need to for a swimming meet. And plus you get all those cross-course lanes, be it somewhere between 20 and 21 cross-course lanes in the 25-yard configuration. That's great for practice.
I would agree with what Doug said. It is a much more preferred 50-meter configuration all around compared to what you're currently using.
Doug and Darren, can I ask, on the 50-meter, we heard, and I've heard this before, not just here in Garden City, about the ability to attract meets, having a better ability to attract meets, regional meets potentially with 50 meters. Is that a fair statement?
Well, this is Doug. My first impression is, you are going to be in a better position to attract regional meets or just meets with the 50-meter long course pool during the summer season than a short course pool. However, it's typically not a given that you're going to be able to attract a meet. To be able to get a meet to occur, which is a good thing for the community, there's always a little bit of sweetening the pot, so to speak, or there's an opportunity cost to be able to host a long course meet each summer.
I would agree with that. This is Darren. I think the other thing to take into account is when we're going ahead and we're doing performance for year-round facilities, and they start talking about meets, it's usually the host, the local host team is the host team. And that's all done on a volunteer basis. So when you go ahead and you start talking about having a whole lot of competitions, you burn out your volunteer basis pretty quickly. So even on a year-round facility, if there's one club team that uses the facility, we typically say they can do 3 to 4, maybe 5 invitationals over the course of a year, but that's really pushing it.
Okay. Thank you. I want to go on to B2. All right. Am I just not? There, I got it. Maybe, or you got it. Okay, so B2 is the sort of opposite, if you will, of B1. So B1, 50-meter pool and slides. B2, we're saying, okay, well, maybe 25 by 25 is enough, but it's more important that we provide that lazy river and more recreational play features and entertainment value, if you will. So in this case, we're incorporating lazy river. It actually rebuilds the zero depth kiddie pool and then has a separate or a connected leisure pool there, item number N. So leisure pool, small area but deeper water, so you can have a place to hang out without having to be in the big water. It's a place where you can put additional play features like basketball goals, things like that, as well as additional spray and splash features that can be incorporated around that lazy river. Play features would also be incorporated into the zero depth, just as there are today. New, if someone wanted to refurb the elephant or come with a new elephant. Those are some of the theming things that we'll work on once decisions are made. And then we keep the spray ground intact. That's there today.
So is the elephant in good shape, or did you guys look at that, or is it?
No, I would have had to get wet, and I didn't want to do that.
I see. Well, I don't know that you can go down the slide, but.
Yeah.
You could, yeah.
It's, we can look at it and see. If nothing else, maybe it's referred as a visual feature, but not incorporated into the water.
And we did look at that. We talked with your staff, and there are some things that have to be updated on that. But from a perspective of the features and the sprays and things like that, it appears to be in very good shape. From good maintenance, and so that is something that could be maintained with a little bit of updating on some of the electronic and controls and mechanical systems, but not nearly the expense of replacing it.
Thank you.
Yep. So in this one, you can see we've had more flexibility to kind of organize some of the recreational things, shallower water near the entrance. Touching on pros and cons, I wanted to hit the A's and the B's together because they are somewhat comparative. So the positives of Concept A, all of these retain the existing bathhouse and improve the entry sequence. They all provide a new slide tower that's not there today. So something could be a little taller, more active, brightly colored, something a little more engaging and new. And when you open a new facility, you see a spike, and the more excitement you can build, that's always a good thing. You can see it spike in attendance. The spectator seating is incorporated in all of these, whether it's 25-meter or 25-yard or 50-meter pool. And then they've all got renovation to the mechanical systems for the zero entry or new zero entry and to the spray ground. And all three are more efficient to operate. Less water, fewer staff for guarding, things like that, less chemical needs. And then also enhanced attraction, so we're estimating an increase in attendance. I think the downside, if you're comparing A or B1 and B2, is if 50 meters is important, then a 25-yard would be a potential downside. That's a decision you'll have to weigh, is 50 meters important versus recreational play? Or do we go to C and do it all? If 50 meters and recreational play is important, then that's the decision to be made. There's a great new facility that could be designed there. And still, and we keep kind of keeping that spray ground in place because it's still new, good condition, newish, compared to things that are 100 years old. But we think that still is a viable thing with some mechanical upgrades. The mechanical system's still in pretty good shape. We could enclose it to give it some more life. But in this case, we're really able to kind of enhance both competitive swimming as well as recreational swimming, work with the existing bathhouse for that historic and sort of sentimental tie. And one thing I would say also is what we're looking at is the visibility of that the slide tower from the surrounding streets. So if you talk about excitement and anticipation in that experience, it's visible from the road more so than it is today because it's not too tall and it's hidden more or less from the roads. But then also when you come through that entrance, you have an opportunity to scan out over everything. So in this arrangement, and really in B2, you see the fun things going on in that lazy river when you get through the entrance, the sort of portal there. And then you see the colorful curly slides and all that stuff going on in the background. And if there's nothing else done, no ninja course, no high fly slides added to the 50-meter rectangle, it's in the background. It's not that exciting to see from an entry sequence, but it's there. The other part of this is if it does become, a separate facility where you want competition teams to enter separately for meets, it's somewhat easy to sort of separate this off from the rec pool. I've been to meets before where you had to shut the whole pool down to have a meet. In this case, you could still have the rec pool open and come up with a way to sort of temporarily separate the two and not have that mingling or mixing of users.
Would you do that with fencing or what?
This is Darren. I would just add one more thing as we're kind of going over the 50-meter versus the 25-yard and where do we allocate resources and how much do we spend. One of the things that Jeff shared with you in the market report is, there's a percentage of your population within that primary service area that's going to go ahead and participate in swimming, which is 17, 18%, somewhere in that number. Of those total participants, you're really talking 5 to 10% of those that are the ultra passionate, competitive swimmers, multi-sport athletes, and those kinds of things. So it's just an important thing. I'm not saying it's not important to have the competitive water in there, but I think when you go ahead and you start talking about allocation of resources and dollars spent, some of those statistics become important as you go ahead and determine where the focus should be.
To the question on how would you divide off the competitive pool from the rec pool? So I'll let Doug follow up, but I've seen it where it's as simple as having a rope. You pull up a temporary rope with some standards you basically want to create a visible barrier, and then you've got people that are monitoring that. You don't generally need to worry about a lot of people running back and forth. What you do is you've got the younger siblings or the older siblings that aren't on the swim team can go over and play in the play pool, drive a little more revenue. They can buy a pass and go to the pool, but you just have a lot easier kind of segregation of people. Doug, anything you've thought or any other things on that, how you separate the rec from the comp pool?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We might put some sort of a landscape buffer between the two anyway. I mean, these are just preliminary concepts. And then that way, one of the things that highlights this is one of the things I want to kind of make where it's all about perception. And this concept C, as you walk through that front door, you're going to see a lot of water with the long lazy river, that zero depth entry, the splash pad, and then as a kind of a secondary focal point, you're going to see that 50-meter pool laid out there. So you're going to see a lot of water. And when you look at it from a numbers basis or the metrics of it, is it's about 50% of the water that your existing pool has. But the neat thing about it is that it is much more usable than the existing big pool. So it's going to perceive like a lot of water, but it's going to be a much more manageable cost. In terms of the layout of the 50-meter pool, that how it could be utilized for meet days and operate as a recreational pool, this concept kind of shows that we're using the existing bathhouse for restrooms for both of those things. There would probably be a secondary entrance in the fencing for this, so that during a swimming meet you might have a secondary entrance. And maybe the thing, depending on how important this is to the community that uses that on a periodic basis, we could actually put a restroom or two in the mechanical space, because that's a long ways to go, and it would help separate the two during those meet days. So there's a lot of options yet open on this, but it's to place the pieces so that we can get your comments and develop a concept even further with everybody's input.
So can you go to D real quick, and then I'll, I think, pretty much wrap up and then go into the options. So concept D is essentially C, but here what we're saying is, what if we demolished the existing bathhouse and built a completely new building? There's some additional cost, but it's not really, I think it's about $500,000 more approximately if you were to just say, you know what, we want to build an all new building. We could reconfigure it a little bit in the way it orients toward the entrance, and the way the drop-off scenario works. This is just a quick concept, but it really fits. You could kind of do that with any of these concepts, but we said, hey, what would be a step up from C even? It would be if we just said, let's rebuild the bathhouse as well at this time. It is 100 years old, roughly. It's served its purpose, but we do think there's a viable way to renovate it as well. Pros and cons of C, they're really the same for D, except the new bathhouse. It's this one in C. You've got the new zero depth entry recreational pool, new leisure pool, lazy river, spray features, new slide tower, renovated mechanical system for the spray ground, 50-meter competitive pool with spectator seating, more efficient operation. There's really not, you know, a negative to this. It's just, how do you compare the cost, the capital cost?
So do all of these, because I know diving boards in the deep end, it's about the only thing that you really can do. I mean, so do these all include diving boards? And there's one thing that people have always asked for is a high dive, which we used to have a tower, but you've seen the pictures of that. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, is that something that's incorporated? I mean, I think I see them on here, but an H, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, in all of these with the rectangular pool, the 25 or the 50, we've essentially included the diving boards in the deep end.
And there is a high dive, or there isn't one?
And we're showing, this is Doug, we're showing both a 2 1-meter board that would be used for springboards, and then 1 3-meter board, which is the high dive.
I'll do it.
And so the water depth is sufficient enough for both of those diving boards.
Is that 12 feet, or what's the water depth? 10 feet?
The water depth would have a 3-meter diving board would be 13.5 feet.
Okay.
So you can see the bottom left corner there in the 25 by 25 dive boards. So southwest corner of that pool. You know, there's also the option if we wanted to pull it off and do a separate dive well. You know, there are ways we can reconfigure some of those things as well. You know, at this time, once we get, again, further into the details, there may be a way to fit that in. But at this time, we're just sort of including it all in the rectangle. Can we go to the options slide, and the last thing I have to present. So as Jennifer, back one. So as Jennifer mentioned, you know, there were additional options that could be considered. And this is one that we struggled with as a team and with staff input, because we understand that there is a lot of pride with the big pool, and there should be. I mean, it's something the city's people know about it. And how do we replace that, but do it in a way that is within, quite frankly, within budget, or at least within an amount that you all feel is worth investing in? You know, how much do you as a community invest in having another sort of pride element, if you will, or something you can say you're the only one, or you've got the biggest, you've got the tallest, you've got the best, whatever. So to do that, WaterTech had kind of scoured for what we could do, and I think the most exciting ideas they've come up with are the ones that we've got a couple videos we want to show. I think surf simulators are cool. They've been done in other places, but they are cool. There's room to add that. The Swirl Bowl, I've been in one. I about threw up, but that's me. But they're fun for some people. Climbing walls are cool. This ninja course, there's one being constructed in Texas. Other than that, you would be sort of the first. You know, not the bleeding edge, but the leading edge. And I think it's not just about entertainment, it also says something about health and wellness and fitness, and having something that could attract a new crowd of the teens and the tweens, as well as the adults that are competitive, that want to do stuff like that.
What exactly does that include, a ninja course?
So we'll show a video in just a second so you can see, but essentially it has a system, you can see a truss up above there that would span over the pool. And when it was, you know, it's one of these things that there are going to be times when it is not in use, and it's raised up out of the water, and then there'll probably be a scheduled time every day when Ninja Course is open, and it lowers down, and there are things you can do, sort of an obstacle course, if you will, in the water. So we'll show a video of that. And then the other one is the fly high slides. So different than a regular slide, which are fun, and you just sort of dump right out into the water. But the idea of really being able to sort of fly high, do a flip, whatever, land in the deeper water. They are new. You've seen them, or you may not have seen them, but they are at more larger resorts. But manufacturer, and I'm going to shut up and let Doug talk about this. Manufacturers are in the process of developing a municipal scale fly high slide because of the attraction factor. And we think, in addition to the fun factor, it's also an element that could add another piece to that entry appeal when you walk in that nobody else has in the area. Again, it's one of those, we can show you a video, but we can't show exactly because there isn't one in another municipality yet. So Jennifer, do you have the videos?
Yep. So
It
we're
kind
going
of
to start.
does speak to that. Big pool,
We're gonna,
big slides, you know.
Yeah,
That was one that jumped out at
Everything's
me, and I was like,
big.
oh no, that is,
Oh, I see.
so we're gonna start with this
Sure.
one.
that's something.
Doug from Water Technologies, we looked through several videos to try and find one that was the closest, that didn't have anything inappropriate, that we weren't able to show. And the
they're
only.
that fun.
It's proved difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
That much fun.
But the only difference in this one than what might actually be built here in Garden City is that you notice that these are a little bit wider. For safety purposes and for the manufacturers building these, they'll be more narrow, so fitted to like one body.
Right.
So anyways, Matt can play it.
Yeah. And these things are really fun because when you go down there and you come off that ramp, and then it becomes a very unique experience. I mean, once you get past that walk up to the top of the tower and everybody's getting very excited about it, then you slide down it. It's like Jennifer said, the ramps are the runs are a little bit narrower, so that everybody stays in the center, so you have a better consistency to the ride. But the neat thing is, the manufacturers are designing slides like this that have that unique appeal, but it's much more repeatable time after time, so it's a much safer ride. So it's not so. Some of the ones that are out there, if you do YouTube videos of high flies, they're very off the wall stuff going on. You know, riding bikes down it and skiing and all sorts of kind of things that aren't appropriate for a commercial entity like this. But they're a lot of fun.
Doug, I would also, this is Darren, I would also offer in with like the surf simulator and the ninja course and the high fly slide. There's the participating in the activity, but then there's also the spectator seating that they go ahead and they put at the bottom of the activity for everybody who doesn't want to go down but wants to watch people crash as they're doing it. It's kind of a, you're watching a car wreck, so to speak, type of thing, but that's as much fun as going down it.
I have a question about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question about capacity. So I think the other thing is you don't want to take forever to be able to get to do something. And the surf simulators that I've been to, it's usually a really long line and a big wait, and that's kind of a turnoff. Where it looks like this, or some of these other things, you can engage a lot more people more frequently. Am I correct? Or are there specs on that you can relate? Like how many people per hour can use some of these attractions?
Yes, that's a very good point. When you look at what we call is throughput, how many people per hour can use this amenity, and the high fly and the climbing wall and the ninja cross, all of those have a very quick throughput, for that feature. The surf simulators, on the other hand, when you look at it from a very high level, usually the throughput's pretty fast until people start getting good at it, and then you have to kind of force them to minimize their ride to like a minute or 2 minutes so that the throughput maintains its capacities. Otherwise, a good surfer could stand that thing for half an hour, and you're right, people are sitting there watching and they're not getting to participate. The other thing, like Darren said, the kind of the friendly, fun factor of this competition is having the spectators watching all of these things. And so how you position those is also important relative to some of the other components to help add revenue, such as concessions and lounge chairs and cabanas and all of those things to really drive that great experience, but also help with revenue.
Well, to me, this really also
that's
builds
your-
that whole idea about health and the fact that getting to the top, I mean, if you
Yeah.
can make it to the top, that's almost a reward.
right.
So you think about.
You
think
fool
about
people
getting to
into
the top.
exercising.
That's
Great.
right, yeah.
But this
Race to
slide,
the top.
Race to the top,
Yeah.
this
that's
is
right.
only one slide, right? This 535?
Or is that,
535?
it's
Doug?
2 slides.
Doug, can you comment what is included in the 535,000 number for slides? 1, 2?
There's 2 slides.
Okay.
One would be more extreme than the other. One would be kind of the more tame experience. The other one would be kind of the more off the wall experience. But either one of them is going to be within a margin of safety, so it doesn't get too extreme. Again, one of the things that the manufacturer is anticipating is that it's going to be much like going off a 3-meter board, and the fact that it's pretty exhilarating each time you do it. It's going to be a different outcome, but it's still a safe landing, and the throughput's high.
Okay.
Okay, you want to show
You
the
know,
other?
like on a 3-meter tower, do you know where the biggest area of risk is for a springboard?
Climbing up that rail
Yeah, or climbing down the rail.
or climbing down, yeah.
That's
You know,
right.
the stairs. And so that's one of the things that when we do a 3-meter diving board nowadays, we're going to put a set of stairs on it, not a ladder.
So Doug, they're showing the Ninja Cross video now. We switched to that. So I would say, this is what you're going to see. This is a digital animation because there isn't one built in place yet.
Yeah, this is an idea that's come from Europe. It's but again, the Americanized version that everybody has, or a lot of places have, are these inflatable obstacle courses that you pull these out of storage. They're in big, huge cubes. You roll them out, you inflate them. You fix the holes from the last time it was put away. You get it out there. It's a lot of fun. The participants love it, but lifeguards don't because they can't see underneath them. So this was a thing that we saw. It's kind of it's where the ninja warrior thing that you see on television meets the inflatable obstacle course. So it becomes very easy to employ, and it becomes very safe. But then it's something you could, bring out every day, have competitions on it, much like you have in the pool. And it gets a lot of users coming and enjoying it. And again, if we can encourage users to come into this large volume of pool and use it, whether they're lap swimming or doing this Ninja Cross, it's going to help the wellness of the community because it's a lot of fun. And they're actually using muscles that they might not be normally using, especially if they're just playing Nintendo or some of these video games on their couch. Does that look like a lot of fun?
Looks
Or a lot of
tiring.
work.
A lot of work,
Yeah.
yeah.
That does look fun.
So,
Yeah, and that's the neat thing. You can make it such that maybe the first couple of years you have a much easier course to get people used to it, and then you can change out the component and make it a much more challenging course.
Yeah.
So there is some flexibility over time
That's nice.
to expand the element.
well, and, if you look at that video, I think there's an easy branding opportunity with how you logo it up and graphics, illuminate it at night, whatever. I can see the ability to host, competitions, if you will, where people come and, you have an evening meet or something like that, and it's all about that. So I think, it's sort of a new thing, and you figure out how to program it,
I
heads
think,
and beds.
Terry, I think there's going to be, I know there are people that are planning to have this be on a circuit of national events where you actually have Ninja Warrior crossing in pools, during the summertime and the wintertime, because there's a lot of call for it.
Yeah.
Is that something that could be retrofit later on, if it's something that we decide down the road? If we end up building a pool that accommodates it?
Yes.
The answer is absolutely yes. What we want to do is put maybe some of the infrastructure in, if it's one of those things that you're interested in, so that we can have some power close by, so we can power some of the lights and the retractable aspect of it. But yes, it could definitely be retrofitted.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I know that the inflatable is, the first year was really good, but over time, keeping it inflated and also just the nature of its, a blow up. It's been really struggled. This last year, we really struggled to keep it up all the time.
Well,
so.
and once it's out there, you don't want to have to take it back out
Right.
Yeah.
on any kind of regular basis.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that a problem?
Well, it isn't only that you limit to 5 people, but you think about, Right, you can't go under it. You have to keep people on where you can see them, so you don't want them to go under it. I mean, that's the only danger, so.
So,
It's the
This is
Ninja
great.
Cross is certainly a much safer type of amenity than the floatables. But the floatables are a good idea because they're very novel at first, but then again, when you start thinking about risk management, there's some worries about those.
Sure.
It could be another way for the fire and the police department to compete. That would be. I'm just joking. Or am
a
I?
commissioner challenge.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah.
So while Matt has this page pulled up, I just want to point out to those watching on Channel 8 and to you commissioners, for anyone who asks, this is the location on the city's website. Under the big pool, you can see it's called Government Documents and then Big Pool, and you can see the timeline for everything that's happened, and then you can obviously see things that you can click on, and if you can click on them, then there's attachments there, all the way down to, you'll see the December 3rd meeting where we have all of the information that's been presented to you, including the videos that we just got done watching, for people to take a look at if they're interested as they weigh into this process. So that is going to conclude the presentation from both myself and the consultants, and we appreciate you listening. I know it was a lot of information, and if you guys have any additional questions, we want to go through those, make sure that you're ready to go into the next 2 weeks. Or if you have any feedback or things that you want from us going into December 17th, please let us know what those things are.
Do we have any questions from people in the audience? Now's the time to speak up. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Do we want
Doug, and
Thank you, everybody.
thanks, guys.
a short break?
Jennifer, great.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Let's take a 10-minute break. Okay.
That would be nice, yeah.
Come back at 3:11.
Jennifer, the way the expense comparison was put together, and really well presented.
5:30 on Wednesday. We
Well-
were still
well done.
trying to
We're back. Hello.
Moving forward.
I guess I'll turn my mic on again.
Oh, what are we ready for, C?
No, actually, I think, yeah, C.
Shannon, don't laugh, because this can be a cheers.
I'm gonna switch the chairs though before I move over.
That's
We're ready.
That's well anticipated. That's
Mayor, we ready?
Yep.
Before we get started again, I just would kind of call your attention. We've got a special guest, Bill Beatty, who was named fire chief last month, is in attendance. Hasn't quite started on the job yet. December 30th is the target date. But Bill, welcome. We're glad you're here. I think he's house shopping, doing a few personnel issues. You're welcome to come up and say hi. Don't feel any pressure. You're not getting paid for this presentation.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity, especially Matt and his staff. The fire department here, from what I've seen coming in, they're phenomenal. They're very professional. They're very well trained. They are on point with their mission, and I think that part of that has to do with this body, giving them the tools and the equipment that they need to do their jobs, and just the overall government here, the way that everybody works together. I think that that's put such a great position in. So that was a big draw for me in applying to come out here, and thank you for the opportunity and having me out here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Excited.
Seeing you back full time. It was nice to meet your parents too. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
I brought my folks along so they could see the place where they're losing me to.
That's right.
Never been too far away from home, so here we are.
All right.
They were already drawn into the policy issue of the big pool, so.
All right, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So I think we're ready for item C. And, yeah, you get to do this again? Yeah. 12C is the consideration of the 2020 City of Garden City legislative policy. Jennifer, I'll get this pulled up.
So we have done now 2 of these. You guys went through and approved the SKC. And as part of that, I didn't realize that we hadn't actually done the City of Garden City state and federal policy. We had a pre-meeting on it. You guys made suggested changes. Those changes were implemented. But this is just your approval of the redesign and rework of some of that wording. It's all been incorporated from that pre-meeting workshop, which there were just a few items, and we're just asking that you approve those today so that we can use them starting in January as we go to Topeka or we go to Washington, D.C. and talk to those that represent us.
I make a motion, we approve the federal and state editions of the 2020 legislative agenda as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2020 legislative agenda, state and federal. Any further discussion, comments? Not. Those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Item 12D, the governing body is asked to consider and approve filling one expiring term on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Carol?
Yes, hi. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a 5-member board. We have one person's term expiring. Right now, we do allow people to serve 2 consecutive terms, but if they want to go to the 3rd term, we have to come here and ask for a waiver. Right now, Jared Hoffman is on the board. His term is expiring. He will be going on to his 3rd term, so if you should reelect him or reappoint him to this position, he would need a waiver to get into that 3rd term. We also have an interested applicant, which is Ronaldo Mesa. His application is attached in your packet. He is also interested in this position. The choice is yours on who you would like to appoint to this Board of Zoning Appeals position.
How many times do you meet typically?
Once a month, but if we don't have any items,
Issues.
then we cancel that meeting. But we do have it scheduled once a month.
Okay. Anybody have any comments about that?
I make a motion that we appoint Ronaldo Mesa to the board.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we appoint Ronaldo Mesa to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Item 12E, the governing body is asked to consider and approve filling the open positions on the Building Safety Board of Appeals. Carol?
Okay. For the Building Safety Board of Appeals, this is a 7-member board. We do have 4 of those positions that are open, that will be becoming open at the end of this year. We have different positions, and the ones that will be coming open are the master plumber, master electrician, an architect registered with the state of Kansas, and then the at-large member. All 4 that we have serving right now are all on their 2nd term, so they would all, if reappointed, be going into their 3rd term. But we do have another interested member, which would be for the at-large position, and that's Ronaldo Mesa again. So your choices are to either reelect all 4 that are serving right now, and that's Harvey, Berngart, Roger Unruh, Jared Hoffman, and Blair Loving. Or you can appoint 3 of them, the first 3, and then have Ronaldo Mesa take that at-large position in the place of Blair Loving. But that's what we have, and the choice is yours on how you'd like to fill that. But we do just have the 1 applicant for the at-large.
I make a motion that we grant the waivers and reappoint Brungart, Unruh, Hoffman, and Loving to the
Second.
positions.
Is there a
I'll
second?
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve alternate number 1, which is a waiver and reappoint the 4 people. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Item F is an executive session. We don't anticipate any action being taken afterwards. So if we move forward to the consent agenda and the commissioner reports, we can come back and conclude the meeting with the executive session. I would just like to point out the executive session reads that it's for personnel matters. It's not for personnel matters. It's for preliminary discussions related to the acquisition of real property. And specifically, it's related towards buildings that might be considered for city operations. So just wanted to clarify that that was a mistake in putting together the agenda that I didn't catch, and the real reason for the executive session. And I've provided Commissioner a copy of the appropriate Kansas State statute reference, but it'd be under 75-431-9B6 instead of 75-431-9B1. But
Okay.
let's jump forward to the consent agenda, if that's okay, Mayor. If approved, it would be items G1 through 4.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda G1 through 4. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I think we're ready for commissioner
All
reports.
right, Commissioner Burns.
Well, outstanding meeting today. I just want to take this opportunity, as this is my second to last meeting. The next meeting will be the mayor's last meeting. So since I was first up, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it's been to be a part of this organization. And I've learned so much from all of you, and it's just been a real highlight of my life. And thank you so much for everything. And I'm always just so inspired and so impressed with the work that all of our employees do. And it was a nice celebration of those folks at the beginning of the meeting and all their years of service. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cessna.
Great to see all the outstanding staff and their dedication and service to the city, but also to the community as well. It's great to see the longevity of our staff that we have. Good information at the pre-meeting about the census count and where the committee's at on that. Still looking for numerators or people to go out and get that information. You can go to 2020census.gov/jobs if you're looking for a job. They still have about 76 openings. So if you're looking, and it's, $15 an hour. So if you're looking at a part-time job, that would be a great opportunity. Match Day is today, and that's at the Western Kansas Community Foundation. A lot of great organizations that you can contribute to and have your dollars that you're contributing to matched by the Western Kansas Community Foundation. So you're leveraging your donations to enhance those organizations in our community that do a really great job in our community. The other thing, when I was getting ready for the match day, I was downtown, and the downtown looks really fabulous with for the holiday season, especially Stevens Park all lit up. The staff did an outstanding job at lighting up the downtown area, and I know the mayor did an awesome job the other evening. It's kind of windy though, but did an awesome job at lighting up the downtown. And that's all I've got.
Commissioner Dick.
Well, Commissioner Sessa did a good job of knocking off all the things I had listed here. Melissa did a great job with the pre-meeting. The census in 2020 is going to be one of the most important things we do next year. I'll just skip. To sales tax collection, if you took a look at that, we're up, it looked like about 10% over last year for that figure, so that's pretty good for that month. So that's pretty good. Congratulations to everybody who celebrated a milestone, work milestone here today. And then the final thing is, with this whole city flag thing and all that, when we were working on that, when the part of the process I was with, one of the big things that we have that Wichita didn't have when they really latched onto their city flag was they didn't really have a logo or a brand that the city itself used. We as a city do have a pretty recognizable from a distance. I mean, the Yucca Burst, like the name or not, and the colors or not, I mean, it is a very brandable, identifiable logo with us. So that, I think, in some regards, does take the role of a city flag like Wichita uses theirs. We could use something like that in this area too. So I would encourage us to keep on using that as a city because of how identifiable that is as a mark for our community. So that's all I got.
Okay, Commissioner Underwood.
So I just want to say it's been an honor serving with you, Commissioner Burns, and I can't believe that, yeah, like you said, we'll talk more about that. I do, Mayor, since you're going to not be doing Mayor, that $15, I'm just kidding you. I do want to talk a little bit about Match Day, and Commissioner Cessna talked about that. They this year they have an outstanding $75,000 to match dollars given. Last year they leveraged almost $500,000 in additional dollars given. 7:00 p.m. to go all the way through that. You can also give online this year, which is something that was new. I actually got to see Commissioner Cessna at the WKCF offices, and I'll tell you, it was hopping. And seeing the enthusiasm of people giving to nonprofits, and especially nonprofits who are building endowed funds, I can't tell you, those are the funds that make it through the hard times, where you really, when you're counting on those. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about, I've had a lot of calls. So in your mailboxes this week, you've been receiving your tax statements, and I've had several people and have called. And I just want to point out, and I asked Melinda to get this. The mayor gave out this to the governor. I thought it was really good. The financial profile for 2020. It talks about the different cities and the mill levies that where we live in. Really, if you look at where Garden City lands, our mill levy, we are very affordable. We really work hard to make sure our mill levy stays consistent. And I just want to over the last 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, our mill levy, it's basically remained flat. We've only had a 0.59 mill levy increase over those last 10 years. So I want to make sure you know that there are other entities that tax. The city is working very hard, the city commissioners, to make sure we keep the mill levy flat. But again, thinking about all of the things that those dollars pay for. I've actually had some people thank me. It's really the street department who's been filling all the potholes and doing a lot of the great work. We just get to take the thank yous. But I just want to make sure you understand that the city commission is working hard to spend those mill levy dollars in a responsible way. And then again, we've kept that very flat over the last several years. This year in 2019, it's 38.57. But if you look over the last 10 years, our history, it's really been an only 0.59% increase. So I just want to make sure you know that those tax statements do a lot, but I just want to make sure that you understand that the city commission is working hard to be responsible. So for all of those who have questions, please don't hesitate. We'd be glad to answer those, any of those, the staff is incredible to talk about what those dollars actually do. I will just tell you, this is online, the 2020 financial profile, excellent resource, and really well talks about a lot of the things that the city is offering. So I just want to make that. I've had a couple of people stop in and ask some questions, and so I want to make sure and point out that these are some things that are available to you as resources. So I'm looking forward to the mayor's party this Friday, and so I really appreciate the work that the commission is doing. So thank you, and the staff.
Okay, I enjoyed the pre-meeting with Melissa. I thought that was good information. I'm always amazed at the longevity of our employees, and that says something, I think, for our organization. Mayor's dinner is Friday at 6 p.m. Also, talking about the sales tax, I wanted to comment that it looks like if December is 500,000, which it should be, it will be the biggest sales tax year in the history. So, 6.8 million. That's our 1% amount. So, I think that, you know, with the bypass and all that mess, you know, I did talk to the manager at Lewis Motor, and he said they have been impacted by it, but, you know, they'll get through it. But I think the other businesses, I was out there on Friday, Black Friday, and I mean, it's amazing how many people are in that parking lot at Shulman Crossing. So anyway, that is all I have, and at this point, we will adjourn.
Not yet.
Or not adjourn, but we'll have a...
Sorry. We do have one more item. It's the
Okay.
executive session. We don't anticipate action, so after the vote's
Who's
taken,
gonna
if
be-
we want to power down
Will.
Channel 8. But this would be, again, for the purpose of preliminary discussions related to the acquisition of real property, specifically related to buildings for city-operated, for city operations.
All right.
there a
I motion to go into executive session pursuant to KSA 754319B6 pertaining to preliminary discussions relating to the acquisition of real property and specifically concerning options for buildings for city operations.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we go into an executive session. How long? 20 minutes?
That'd be fine, yes.
20 minutes?
And
Who's going
And with-
Jennifer, Matt, and Randy Grizel.
And with Jennifer, Matt, and Randy
Randy?
in the meeting.
Yeah.
With Jennifer, Matt, and Randy Grizel in the meeting.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And after this
Thank
all day,
you.
I'll try and remember what I'm supposed to say.
We shut these off.